Infinity Pool. So Infinity Pool is the new Brandon Cronenberg feature, son of acclaimed body horror director David Cronenberg. Brandon Cronenberg has recently made one feature that we are really familiar with, Possessor, which came out a couple years ago. And then I forget the name of his one previous to that, but we didn't see it. So we saw Possessor on the podcast, our old episodes out there. This is a new feature starring Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth. Alexander Skarsgård plays James Foster, who is a struggling writer, struggling with writer's block, who's written one book and hasn't done anything in 6 years. He's married to M, and they're enjoying a wonderful vacation on the fictional island of La Tolca when he meets Gabby. What is her last name? Bauer, played by Mia Goth, and her husband Alban, I think, who are two other vacationers enjoying their stay at La Tolca, and they get to know each other, and he kind of fancies her and she kind of fancies him, and M's like, what's going on with you? But it's high society snobbery, a la Triangle of Sadness, the menu. Our characters go out one afternoon, stray away from the resort, and after a horrific accident discover that the island of La Tolca, its own nation, has some radically different rules about how crime is doled out, or crime is dealt with, punished. And James Foster finds out that he is sentenced to die for his crime on the island, but he can get out of it by donating a large fund of money to La Tolca's vacationer pension, or whatever it's called, and having a double built. A full double, not just like a mannequin that looks like James Foster, a full-on clone. And after agreeing to this and getting money out of a shady ATM, he is put in a hospital gown, and he has this thing put on his head, and he climbs in this tank full of this thick, viscous red liquid, sees some insane vision, and comes out on the other side, James Foster, alongside a double, also James Foster. The double is swiftly served justice, and suddenly James cannot unsee the things he's seen. And it's here on La Tolca when he discovers maybe what he truly is. The movie is Infinity Pool. It is like 95 minutes, nice tight body horror feature. Andy, what'd you think?
I wanted to like this movie a lot more than I ended up. There's a lot that works. There's a lot of interesting stuff. I think that Brandon Cronenberg is better director than writer. But it had me like about halfway, 2/3 into the film. I was really on board, and then it kind of doesn't know where to go. But the premise is fascinating because it's set up in a very stereotypical way. We have this trope of like, these two couples meet on an island. They're kind of flirting around with each other. You definitely get the idea there's going to be some infidelity happening. And one of those, well, the island is not all it seems. What's going on behind closed doors? So it has a lot of those kind of tropes and setups that we're familiar with, but then it goes in a very, very different direction. And it reminded me a lot of Possessor, that has a really fascinating premise. This is what we get out of this as well. Again, with the if you commit a crime, here's, provide us with funds and build the clone, and then you can kind of get out of it. And this in a way makes them immortal and invincible, and that just causes a ton of problems to spiral out of control, when essentially there's no consequences for what you do.
So I think I like this a little bit more than Andy did. Like Knock at the Cabin, I'm not like hugely warm on it, but I did like a lot about it. I think it's stronger than Possessor. But on its own merits, Infinity Pool does have a couple of issues. But I like this like fundamental idea of the doubling, right? You think of films like Richard Ayoade's The Double, or Denis Villeneuve's Enemy, or even Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, right? Films where our protagonists are cloned in some fashion, metaphorically or literally, right? For a magic trick or in reality. And I like this idea that this movie functionally opens pretty normal, right? It's pretty fine. The trailer does a great job of highlighting this. The first 45 seconds of the trailer, you're like, okay, this looks like a normal feature. But then when tragedy strikes and somebody explains, you're going to die unless you pay us to have a double built, it's like, what? And then you get into like the weird twist. Like it's like Cronenberg turns on the weird, right? Like that's when the movie hits the gas and takes off. And I like that. Like, I like that it's got a pretty straight start before it just like drops into the madness. And I think that's good stuff. The problem is a little like Possessor. Like, I don't know if Cronenberg quite has the through line for how to get through the madness. David Cronenberg, his father, obviously had a bit more time to work this out, but his stuff was just a little bit like cleaner. And Brandon's work, I think, is a bit more abstract. This one's a bit more straightforward, but like it starts to get messy. As our characters interact with one another, there's some backstabbing, there's some second guessing. I like that James ends up finding a bit of kind of a community for people like him on La Tolka. I like that he's kind of taken under the wing of the Gabby Bauer, the Bowers, and they kind of say, well, hey, there's more to this than meets the eye. And I like that mystery kind of unfolds, especially in like the meaning of a double, right? Like the term infinity pool not only refers to like the luxurious pool with a horizon edge that you'd find at a resort like this, but also the idea that you would be stepping into this pool of liquid and being cloned into infinity, like being there forever. I like that the movie plays with identity, right? Like it very quickly asks the question, who is the double? Was James Foster killed, or was the double of James Foster killed? Are you the double or aren't you? Like, I like that it starts to pose those questions, but unfortunately by the third act, it just kind of gets messy. I've heard people criticize Mia Goth's performance in the later stages because it's a little too expressive. I've heard Skarsgård is a little too toned back, but I'm not sure. Andy, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I would agree that by the third act, it doesn't really know where to go. And this is, reminds me a little bit of Knock at the Cabin, where you got a great premise to start things off, but then you don't know how to wrap it up. And that can be really challenging. It's like, okay, you've come up with this great idea. How do we develop characters and conflict and resolution through it? And that's where the film kind of struggles. And it becomes a little bit preoccupied with these kind of psychedelic moments between like the deaths of the clones and a lot of drugs and partying going on. Becomes very much about that, and that's where I think he excels, like creating these very visceral experiences. Like you get a flash, like a photosensitive warning before the movie starts, so it's going to be good. So that stuff works really well. But then again, developing more clear themes, really coming to creating conflict, resolving that conflict, the denouement, it kind of doesn't know where to go. And I would agree, love Mia Goth, she's the darling scream queen, but she's like at an 11 for most of this film, and it's just too much. Like she needs to dial it back, be at like an 8.
It's true.
It's just too much.
Yes, I think Cronenberg is as much an audience member to like Mia Goth as we all are, and I think he just like loved the energy she was putting out. And some of the later scenes of this movie, if you're watching on Facebook, we've got a bit from the trailer up where she's in the street like screaming and holding a firearm, and she's like laughing maniacally. I did like it. I'll be honest. I was into it. I felt like she was channeling quality Nick Cage, like which not everybody can do. That is a few and far between. Like
she went full Cage.
Yeah, it's like she's turning it to a level that I'm like, oh baby, like not many people can get up here. Even Skarsgård, I think, tries to go for it, but doesn't quite start to reach that peak. I think she's great. I think she can do more. But like I said, when we saw this, and I saw this together, Cronenberg's like weird, obscure horror psychedelic montages. He does it in Possessor, and he does it in this feature as well. They remind me of like the Sylvester Stallone like sports montage, right? Like getting fit, running to the top of the stairs, the 80s music. It's kind of like that, but like weird, obscure stuff where you're seeing like melted faces and like fluorescent lights, like all kinds of weird things happening. And this movie has like 3 sequences of that. Like, and one of them is particularly long. And he's right. Like, not only does the film open with a flash on the screen that says, "Hey, warning, if you are prone to epilepsy or seizures, take caution." They had it printed on the door and at the door of the theater. And then when I bought the ticket, like all down the way,
bring your glow sticks.
Yes, like Cronenberg has made it very clear that I will put any disclaimer necessary on this movie to not have to change it to be the way it is. And it's been changed. Originally, the cut of this was NC-17, and it's been cut back for what's here. Big content warning. Still plenty of reasons for this movie to be hard rated R. Good Lord. Content warning, nudity, violence, language, nudity again. But I can imagine, having already seen it, I think Andy as well, you could easily imagine a world where this could be turned up a little bit and be too much for general audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much an experience, a very visceral one. Fantastic sequences. And again, Possessor had some of this too. That's a much smaller film, on a smaller level, so he can't indulge as much, but he still has that kind of psychedelic flair in that movie, and he brings it over to this one as well.
Yeah, overall, I think like Infinity Pool is this, like Possessor, obscure piece of like atmospheric and bizarre horror, like that has elements of body horror. I like that it's larger questions of this idea of doubling, of like creating another version of yourself and then having to watch that version get murdered brutally in front of you. Like I like that. And like Andy's right, like that opening, that hook is great to start with, but it just feels like it doesn't really get off the runway past that because it's such a grand opening. Possessor's got the same problem. The byline for Possessor's fantastic. A woman who's part of an organization that possesses people and uses them for ill means gets trapped inside a body and can't get out. Like, that's great. Like, that's a great start for like a sci-fi movie, but like it has trouble getting over the finish line with that much bluster. And Infinity Pool, unfortunately, suffers a bit of the same problem, I think, if you are not into the really odd, bizarre atmospheric stuff, which I was charmed by in this feature. Andy, not so much. I think it's going to be less people are going to like that than more, for sure. Like it's tough to recommend.
It definitely needs, I'm reminded of course, the Cronenberg senior, David Cronenberg, who brought us Videodrome, and Videodrome is a fascinating premise, middle and end of like the whole premise, asking about what is reality, what happens when we begin creating our own reality. It's great from start to finish, and Brandon Cronenberg has to find that third act. He's got to find how to tie it all together, how to say something with this these incredible premises that he comes up with.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I feel the same way. Videodrome, fantastic example, by the way. Can't believe how well that movie holds up. We've still talked about it since we saw it. Good God, like that movie's more relevant now than ever.
even more so.
Yeah, being trapped by the allure of the screen. Like,
yeah,
oh
what
God,
happens when you create your own realities?
It's right. Oh God. Anyway, overall, I think Possessor. Overall, I think Infinity Pool. I think it's better than Possessor. I do. Like I like it more, but I do think he's still, I don't know. He's got to keep chasing it, and he's gonna make something else. But
right, I think he's a better director than writer. I think he would do phenomenal things with someone else's script, with a really solid script. I think he would do amazing things.
I think that's actually really valid. Any other thoughts for recommendation?
I'm ready.
Would you recommend Infinity Pool?
I would say, again, if you're interested, it's not for the faint of heart. It's for those who seek out bold cinema. Don't recommend it to your parents, but save it for streaming. I don't think it's necessarily something you need to run out and see in the theater. It definitely is probably a little bit better experience there because of all of the lights flashing, that kind of stuff. But it's definitely for the cinephile, if you're looking for things that are new and out of the ordinary and things like that.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. If you are interested in Infinity Pool, I would encourage you to go see it in a theater, because if you've already heard all of this, you've seen the trailers, you probably have an idea of where Brandon Cronenberg's coming from. He's a pretty niche guy. If you still want to know, go see it, because that will be your best experience to see it. That will be the best way to see it. If you're not sure, if you're like, man, this just sounds too weird for me, 100% streaming. 100% streaming, because it won't hurt. Like, it's still a pretty quick feature, and I don't think it's going to be. It's not particularly cinematically compelling. Like, I think this will play fine on your home surround sound speaker system, whatever. Like, that'll work. Don't watch it on your phone. I mean, if you can swing it, like don't watch it on your Apple Watch. But like, yeah, I think this will be coming to HBO or something like that at some point, and I think it will be easy to watch. I might have to go back and watch it again. Yeah, I like Infinity Pool though. I like it. It's weird and it's different. I like it more than Possessor. I'm excited to see what he does next. But I definitely, now that I've seen 2 films from Brandon Cronenberg, I think I'll be a little wiser the next time going in, looking for those like obscure montages or some of these kind of tropes. Because one way or another, my man is an auteur. He's making his own art. He's just got to figure out what that means for everybody else.